Now, writing skills are vastly important if you want to crank out a good book. While there are some readers who won't necessarily care if your writing skills are superb, fine-tuning what you create will make a world of difference. Well, I'm Mike with WriterSanctuary, and in week 9 of the Reedsy Master Class, How to Write a Novel, Tom Bromley shares some of the vital elements of writing skills and what makes a good book. On day 1, the lesson was focused more on word choices. The words that you put down in your manuscript matter greatly, and all of them need to have a purpose. This includes helping the reader envision the scene clearly and what someone is thinking. Making things easy to read often makes the book harder to write. This is because you're paying more attention to the good, clean writing. Now, writing isn't showing off that you know how to use a thesaurus. It's about the reader enjoying the story. I often make the same argument when it comes to writing a blog post and why most people write to accommodate an 8th grade reading level, which is about what most people have on the internet. Now, if you want some great guidance, take a look at George Orwell's 6 Rules of Writing. I'll make a video on this example, but if you want to read up on the rules, I'll leave a link to the page in the description down below. But in a nutshell, it's all about making language accessible for all to enjoy. The last thing you want is for a reader to have to bust out a dictionary to understand what you're writing. Well, that is unless you're writing a scientific paper or you're aiming for someone with a much higher reading level. But like I tell all my writers, write the tutorial where a 70-year-old grandpa can understand it. Now, day 2 is about verbs and how they make everything move. Now, as a rule of thumb, you always want to use active verbs instead of passive. This is also true when writing a blog post, as it keeps the reader in the here and now. For instance, I finished writing my first book is an active voice, while my first book was written by me is passive. Tom Bromley also went over examples of general and specific verb choices and how specifics can impact the overall tone of the scene. Also, a way to look at sentences is how nouns keep them still while verbs give them movement. And plenty of movement is always good. Now, day 3 was about sounds and how a manuscript reads within the minds of a reader. It was a bit confusing at first, but Tom Bromley demonstrated the impact of verbs and consonants in various examples. Now, good writing is a combination of alliteration, assonance, and consonants. Combined, they add emphasis to sentence structure with the minds of the readers. Basically, alliteration is the occurrence of the same letter or sound at the beginning of a closely connected words. For instance, I smashed the shopping cart. It's the sh sound that creates the alliteration. Assonance is a repetition of vowel sounds within a sentence. For example, the Great Lakes, or a fleeting scene. And consonance is repeating similar consonant sounds with adjacent words. For instance, a broke bike. The consonants in this case are both the b and the k sounds. The bottom line is that using shorter words makes text sound more like actual speech and less like an IKEA manual. Now, one of the best ways to tell if your book is reading well enough is to read it out loud. This is something I do constantly as it helps me create realistic conversations. If it makes sense in my head, then it probably makes sense in the book. And I can't tell you the amount of times where reading out loud has helped me find all kinds of grammatical issues, as well as finding weak points in a story to fine-tune them. Like even after I edit and then my editor edits to spare, when I read it out loud for the audiobook, I come across all kinds of things. So reading your book out loud is definitely a bonus. On day 4, we touched up more on sentence structure. Remember, shorter sentences usually equate to a faster pace, which it can also impact the emphasis of a scene. Sentence structure has a rhythm and flow when setting up a scene. Now, too many short sentences can lose the flow and rhythm, while too many long ones can make it feel long and drawn out. Most writers create a bit of a balance for easy reading as well as maximizing the impact of a shorter sentence. However, long sentences can be made to feel like short ones through the use of punctuation and what it entails. I've seen single sentences take up the majority of a page but didn't feel that long because of how it was structured and the use of hyphens and commas. Now, day 5 was all about diving into a paragraph structure, which is similar to how sentences work. Only paragraphs are on a much larger scale. The same principles of sentence structure apply to that of a paragraph. For instance, the pace is impacted by length. Shorter paragraphs speed up the story while longer ones slow it down. Yet, longer paragraphs can make for a more immersive element in the scene despite it slowing down the pace of the story. Now, one way to accentuate a part of the scene is by using a short single sentence paragraph. I use these quite often to add a special impact that I want readers to realize in the book. Use these to bring attention to a vital point in the scene for the reader. Like sentences, it's all about finding a good balance to make a better read while highlighting important elements. Now, the Saturday author interviews focused on a variety of writing challenges, which I have plenty of. Mostly getting over the challenges we often put onto ourselves. For myself, it's mostly comes down to time, or lack thereof, on most days. A good way to avoid some challenges to your writing style is to surround yourself with people who you can trust to be honest with their input. Now, for the longest time, it was hard for me to accept compliments on my writing because I always think that people are just saying things to be nice. It all goes down to that belief I have that most people have an ulterior motive. Sure, it prevents me from being scammed, but it's kind of a paranoid way to live. So it's important to trust someone who will point out the issues, otherwise you'll never learn to develop your skills. That's one of the biggest reasons why I'll read all the reviews on my books, regardless if they're good or bad. A bad review, sometimes they'll have an actual critique that will point out some issues that I might want to fix later on. Of course, you also have the trolls that you have to worry about. Trick is to know which is which. It's also good to focus on your accomplishments, regardless of how small. Now, this is something that I push quite often anyway, and it's nice to know that authors often do the same thing when keeping themselves motivated. Now, remaining positive can keep you in the right headspace. And some authors will take time away from their books to let their subconscious work out the story issues. It helps with writer's block. Unfortunately for me, I often forget, which is why it's better that I don't take too much time away from my book. Otherwise, I create a ton of plot holes that I completely forget about. And I almost forgot a major one in Kingmaker. Now, while this week did have a few confusing elements at first, Tom Bromley did a great job of showing examples of how each point works in a book. That's probably one of my favorite parts of this course, actually. Now, it's one thing to teach something to your audience, but to show how it works in the real world makes a massive difference to help people understand. And Tom Bromley does that in spades with this course, which I truly appreciate. Now, next week, we'll be working on writing techniques, yet another series that I'm excited to dive into. And with any luck and a bit of skill, this next book and Fury are going to be light years ahead of anything I've written thus far. Anywho, if you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. For more videos about self-publishing, blogging, freelance writing, or anything else I cover, hit the subscribe button. Don't forget to hit the notification bell. I think it's going to do it for me today. I need to get ready for a live stream. I'll see you next time.